It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, what is up, my friends? And yes, I know I have hair. I know it freaks people out that I actually grow hair. I'm going to get a million emails and comments that I have hair. It's so funny. A couple months ago, or I don't know, like a month ago or something, the first time I took my hat off and I had hair, my wife's brother even emailed me. He might be watching today, but yeah, he messaged my wife because everybody was freaking out because I have hair. I broke the internet. No, hopefully you guys are doing well. Been talking in the chat a little bit here. Man, what just a firestorm of work. I don't even, like, it's so hard to even keep track of the days. It's just been mind numbing, just over and over and over again. It's like eat, sleep, repeat. You guys ever feel like the movie Groundhog Day, where he wakes up to Sonny and Cher every morning on the alarm clock? Bill Murray does. And it's, eat, rinse, repeat. Eat, rinse, repeat. Like, it's just like over and over. Same, like my alarm goes off the same time every day. I make the same cup of coffee. I get up, I go to bed. It's just like blah. It's crazy. It's mind numbing, this craziness right now. And of course, like everybody else, every other HVAC company out there, I'm short staffed, overworked. It's good and bad news, but I had one of my best customers call me and that I've, worked with for 20 plus years. And they're like, yeah, we're going to start preventative maintenances again. And it's like, they haven't done PMs. Terry, thank you so very much for the super chat there, bud. That's awesome, Terry. But yeah, so it's good news that they're going to start a PM program, but I service like 38 of their restaurants, and it's like, holy crap, I haven't done PMs for them in like 10 years. I don't even know, like, I don't have the staff for it. Like, but they're not going to start it till after the summer. So that's a plus. At least I have that to aim for, but it's nuts right now. So, oh man, I don't know about cool down. We don't have no cool down, Jason. I don't know. It was 100 today, so I guess that's kind of a cool down. Our average has been about 100 to 110. I want to clarify something too. I know not as many people watch these live streams as watch the videos, but I do not live in the Coachella Valley. A lot of people think that I live in the Palm Springs area, Coachella Valley. I don't. I just go out there every once in a while to service it. It takes me like 2 hours to get out there from where I'm at. I'm from Riverside, California. So, yeah, I service Coachella Valley, and that's where every once in a while people see me post like pictures when it's like 123 degrees outside or something like that. But yeah, it's nuts, man. Just trying to keep up with the calls, and we're way behind on, what the heck is that? Oh, my wife was texting me. We're way behind on service calls. We're about a week to a week and a half behind on service calls right now. So we've been prioritizing walk-in freezers, walk-in coolers, air conditioner calls, and ice machine calls. And then like reach-in cooler calls kind of get the back burner because majority of the restaurants have multiple reach-in coolers that they can do without one. But it's even getting to the point that like I went to an overtime service call over the weekend for a walk-in freezer down, and they're like, yeah, are you here for my reach-ins too? And they had like 3 reach-ins down. I was like, no, like, I'll see you next week, you know? I just can't even keep up. But it's a good thing to have, right? Because last year, during the lockdown and everything, you know, we were dead. So take it when you can get it, I guess, is what it is. So, hey, welcome to the live stream, everybody. For those that are new, because I know we get a lot of new viewers every single time, and I invite a lot of new people to the live stream. So my name is Chris. I'm an HVAC service technician here in Southern California, and you obviously found my YouTube channel, so I make these videos just to share the little bit of knowledge that I have, okay? I'm not the best service technician. I don't know everything. I make mistakes all the time, and I try to show those mistakes as much as possible to let people know that we're all human, okay? We all make mistakes. The most important thing is that if you do make a mistake, you want to try to learn from it, okay? And that's what I try to do as much as possible. So, yeah, I brain fart there for a second, but if you guys have any questions or things that you want me to cover, do me a favor, put the question in the chat and put it in caps lock. It helps me to see what's going on in there, okay? As usual, I have a list of questions that I gathered from emails and YouTube comments, and then I'll definitely get to the live stream questions too. So, let me see what we got here. Yeah. No, I'm not going to. Well, I don't know. I don't think I want to grow a mullet. I don't think so. That's not my style. I had a mullet when I was a kid. I got pictures of myself when I was a kid with hair down behind my back. Yeah, that was like a thing. And my left ear pierced. All that good stuff. So, all right. So, let me look through the chat here right now. Just kind of seeing who's in here. Lots of familiar faces. That's cool. Lots of new faces. So, that's awesome. Well, right on. Thank you for the nice words there, Jason Johnson. Okay. How much have I seen materials go up? Yeah, we've seen materials and wait times for parts and all kinds of stuff like that go up. Honestly, guys, I see these posts in social media groups all the time with people like, yes, I'm bummed out that material prices are going up, okay? But I see these desperate posts. What am I going to do? The prices are going too high. What do I do? What do I do? What am I going to tell the customer? I mean, I just mark my parts up a certain percentage, whatever I pay for them. So as the price goes up, the price gets passed on to the customer. I do not absorb any price increases whatsoever. Now, I'm on the commercial side. I know commercial is a little bit different than residential, but even on residential, you shouldn't be absorbing any price increases at all, okay? You should be passing along price increases to the customer immediately. So refrigerant is going up daily. My prices for refrigerant change daily because it's going up. I mean, I can't, not pass that on to the customer. I'm not absorbing anything. So yeah, it goes to the end user. So when refrigerant prices go up, I think R22's over $800 a cylinder for a 30-pound cylinder right now. Over $800 my cost. It's, so I mean, that gets passed on to the customer. It is what it is. In fact, I went to a walk-in cooler service call over the weekend. I had to sell 20 pounds of R22. After markup, that was a pretty pricey walk-in charge, but they've got new equipment. The customer doesn't want us to repair it. They want us to install new equipment. But here's the thing. I can't install the new equipment right now because I just got to keep up with service calls. So it is what it is. The last time I put gas in it was 4 or 5 months ago. So just keep doing it. Storm, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is amazing. So he says it's been a while since he's been on the stream and that he appreciates sharing of the knowledge and still putting out quality content. And he's asking, any tips for diagnosing a blast chiller? You asked about a year ago and figured you'd ask for an update about a blast chiller. Well, You know, I haven't worked on a blast chiller in a long time, but I mean, I'm not intimidated by them at all. The only tricky thing about blast chillers is that usually they have some proprietary technology. So if you guys don't understand what a blast chiller is, okay, they can range in sizes. They could be small, where they can just push a cart into. They could be a giant walk-in cooler. But essentially what it is a massively oversized refrigeration system that typically has a lot of airflow when it is in the blast chiller mode, okay? So they'll typically have like a standard operation where it operates as a normal cooler, and then you'll have like turbo mode that you put it into blast chill mode. And what it's trying to do is it tries to bring large quantities of food down to temperature in a very short amount of time, okay? So that's why they call it a blast chiller. It'll be insane like how big the refrigeration equipment typically is on that, and it'll have a lot of fan motors, and it's really going to bring that temperature down fast. So when you're working on those, oftentimes they will have, depending on what manufacturer, some sort of proprietary technology, control schematic or control board, different things like that. I mean, if you get into the older ones, they were super basic, but it's not very often that you see those anymore. So some of the newer ones will have some super fancy like thermometer probes, and it'll have multiple probes, right? So that way you can put it in multiple pieces of the food, usually like some sort of chicken after it's cooked or something like that. You'll insert these probes into all the different pieces of product, and it will aggressively try to bring down all that product, and then it'll slowly slow down the refrigeration, you know, like the blast chiller function as the food gets closer to product temperature. But essentially what they're trying to do is bring the temperature down within a matter of minutes versus, you know, 6-7 hours or whatever it be. I have a lot of customers that try to use their walk-in cooler or walk-in freezer, which unfortunately it's not really designed for that. So I have customers that'll cook an entire, you know, tray full of ribs, and then they want to push them into the walk-in freezer right out of the oven. And it's like, guys, stop that. You know, that's not what this is made for. So as far as tips for troubleshooting the blast freezers, or blast coolers or blast chillers, whatever you want to call them, it's really about talking to the manufacturer, okay? It's going to be a basic refrigeration system. It's typically going to have a condensing unit, 1 or 2 condensing units, depending on the setup, and it's going to have a sight glass, a dryer, and an expansion valve. You're typically not going to see a blast chiller with a capillary tube system. So obviously you want to make sure that it's got the proper amount of refrigerant in it. And this is all basic stuff, but I'm just kind of covering the basics. You want to make sure it has the proper amount of refrigerant in it. You're going to need to have a clear, solid sight glass whenever the system's operating at full capacity. But really, it's about leaning on the manufacturer and talking to the manufacturer and finding out what their different control strategies are. Again, some of them have those funky circuit boards that are looking for product temperature and different things like that. So you want to definitely lean on the manufacturer when it comes to those blast chillers. Unfortunately, several of the blast chillers that I've worked on in the past were foreign made, like they were from France or different places like that. And yeah, it was a little tricky having to deal with troubleshooting. So when it comes to some of those, you know, yeah, you really got to use your technical skills and try to figure it out. I would really, really push the customer away from buying some of that foreign made stuff that doesn't have good technical support and or good literature written in English that we can understand. You know, it's kind of tricky to work on that stuff, but you know, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But you know, and the parts typically are extremely expensive too. Like special especially the ones, the one that I'm thinking of right now that I used to work on that was from France. It had like a proprietary motor that was from some European country, and it was really difficult to change like a condenser fan motor over to an aftermarket one because just the mounting way, and it was just really a pain in the butt as far as I remember. But it's really about leaning on the manufacturer is really what it is, if you can, okay? And then obviously just looking at the basic refrigeration functions, making sure all the fan motors are working, making sure the coils are clean, making sure the refrigerant charge is correct. If you have a refrigeration system with an expansion valve and a receiver, bottom line, when that system is running free and clear of any ice or any dirty condensers or dirty evaporators, that sight glass needs to be clear. Bottom line, okay? Obviously, okay, now when I say this, I get a lot of pushback sometimes from people about, oh, well, don't push sight glasses being clear and all that stuff because it can be, you know, people get confused by that. When I say you need to clear the sight glass, that it's not just a walk in there, put refrigerant in it till the sight glass is clear and walk away. You need to use some common sense. You need to watch it. Watch the system operating. Are you flooding back to the compressor? You know, do we need an expansion valve adjustment? That kind of stuff. So I'm assuming that people have common sense when I say to clear the sight glass, okay? Remember that the whole point of these videos that I started making them in these live streams is I do them for my own service technicians, okay? And never do I want to take away someone's job. So while I fully support intuitive business owners and intuitive homeowners trying to fix their own stuff, hey, that's so be it. But there's a time and place when you need to call a service technician, okay? So I purposely leave certain parts out of my videos. I don't want to give all the information out there, okay? Because I don't want to take anybody's job away. I'm assuming that majority of the people that are watching my videos have some sort of mechanical common sense and can understand the things that I leave out, because I don't want to set up a step-by-step video showing everybody how to do the entire process, okay? I'm totally okay with people learning how to fix their own equipment. Then so be it. But you do have to jump through a few hoops, and you got to read some manufacturer's information. Some of the stuff that I leave out might be for liability reasons. Like, I've gotten many questions from people. Why don't you show me how to set up my torches? Why don't you show me what pressures to set it at? Why don't you show me what tip to use and all this different stuff? Yeah, that's a massive liability thing. I'm not going to give you guys a step-by-step, this is how you set your pressure gauge, this is how you turn your torch on, because if I give you something incorrect, I don't want to get sued for that. You know, so I do have to leave some things out. But now that I went off on a rant, I hope that I answered a little bit of your question, Storm. I know that, you know, I didn't give a total explanation there, but all right. Storm, you're saying a $300 probes a pop on this Charleston. Also had to install a $3,500 touchscreen controller on it to get it to work. Spendy is an understatement. Exactly, Storm. And that is the stuff that I ran into. I've worked on some Charlestons too, and it's nuts how expensive they are. It really is. And it's funny too, because the ones that I worked on, I haven't worked on one in years, but it's funny how much those parts cost, the circuit board and different things. And then like the user interface was so rudimentary. It was like, really? They paid this much money for this crap? And it's like, duh. I was working on a refrigerator today. It was a Delfield unit, and it had a bad evaporator fan motor. And I pulled out the evaporator fan motor, and it was the cheapest piece of junk. It was like a little plastic axial fan motor, like out of a computer. Like, it felt like it was out of a computer. And it's like, wow, they really have resorted to some cheap parts. And that's happening all across the board. And that's another thing too. You know, you see the prices of everything going up. And while I'm okay with, you know, because there's a supply demand and different things like that, prices, it's inevitable. They're going to have to go up. But some of this stuff, like some of these manufacturers are on crack when they want to charge this much for a part. And you're like, you could literally sometimes use your brain and go get an aftermarket part that is the exact same part. Like literally the part number on it. Like I think someone posted on one of the social media groups that they needed to order a special OEM contactor from the manufacturer. And they showed a picture of the contactor. It was just a Mars contactor. It had a Mars OEM number on it. And he paid hundreds of dollars for that contactor. And you literally look it up, and it's the exact same contactor you can buy from the supply house. Like for $30, you know? And it's like, oh my gosh, these manufacturers are some of them are getting away with highway robbery, really. It's kind of crazy. So, I wanted to start this stream out with a rant, okay? I see it so often that people, and I am going to do a video on this, like a short or something like that, because I want to get the information out there, okay? When it comes to working with refrigerants, okay, bottom line, do not mix refrigerants, period, guys. Do not mix them, okay? The only time it would be acceptable to mix refrigerants is if it's at the instructions of the manufacturer, okay? And what I mean by that, if any of you guys have ever done hospital work or scientific refrigeration work, okay, you will find that some of the ultra low refrigerators that hold vaccines and medicines and blood and different things like that, they will have proprietary mixtures of refrigerant. The manufacturer has had engineers come in there and specify you put this much of this and like 5 different refrigerants. Even then, I'm not a fan of mixing refrigerants. I will typically ask the manufacturer to send a pre-mixed blend to me that I don't have to mess with, okay? But when it comes to working on refrigerators or air conditioners, it is never acceptable to drop refrigerant on top of another refrigerant. And I say drop because a lot of people get confused with the term drop-in, okay? The term drop-in originally started back when we had blends that were replacing R12 and R502, okay? And the term drop-in came in because what it meant was you could replace the R12 with, let's just say 409A. That was the one that I used all the time. You could replace it with 409A, and 409A was considered a drop-in refrigerant. That did not mean that you dropped 409 on top of R12. That meant that you pulled out the R12 and you put 409A without making any major system modifications, okay? Even then, there was some caveats to that too, okay? So the term drop-in's a little bit misleading, but it is never acceptable for you to put 407C on top of R22 or insert name of whatever flavor of R22 replacement you want to say. You do not mix them, okay? If you mix the refrigerants, you're setting yourself and the next guy up for a headache. Understand something, that a lot of these new refrigerants have hydrocarbon components added to them, okay? Flammable refrigerants. Mixing them, you don't know what's going on. You're potentially setting someone up for a potentially dangerous situation. And especially if you are changing the refrigerants, you need to mark it, okay? So that way the next technician knows what refrigerant is in there. What you will find is that some of these blends that are meant to replace R22 have a very similar pressure temperature relationship at certain temperatures, right? So it can be hard to differentiate between R22 and 407C at certain temperatures. So that makes it even more difficult, okay? So don't mix refrigerants, guys, okay? If you have an R22 system that you're going to use an alternative flavor for, you take out the R22 and you follow the manufacturer's installation instructions, okay? Be very careful about using some of these refrigerants that the supply houses claim work really well. You guys need to do your own research. I've had my own headaches with R22 replacements. Honestly, I'm not using any right now. I'm still using R22 to this day, okay? But as the prices go up, I'm having to really start thinking about doing some changeovers and things like that. And that is where I'm going to reach out to my buddy Ralph over at Honeywell Refrigerants, okay? I don't know if Ralph's in here. I'm not really paying attention to the chat right now, but he will often come in the live chat. If you guys, any of you guys in the chat have questions about changing the refrigerants over and or replacements and what to do, I want you to email my buddy Ralph over at Honeywell Refrigerants and he can help you out, okay? I have no affiliation with Ralph. He's just a really cool dude that made contact with me. You want to know the funny thing is that Ralph, the way that Ralph and I got in contact was he watched one of my videos and I did something that wasn't quite right, okay? And what I mean by that was I was using R404A refrigerant when there was actually a new law that had come out in California that I didn't know about that said I wasn't allowed to use R404. And Ralph was a really nice guy. He wasn't rude about it or anything like that. He reached through the grapevine. He got a hold of Brian Orr, I think, and then Brian gave him my number. And then Ralph got a hold of me and just educated me on these new laws that passed in California that I was ignorant to, okay? I didn't know. So Ralph's a really cool dude. Again, I have no affiliation other than just being a nice dude and helping me out whenever I had questions about refrigerants and different things like that. So reach out to my buddy Ralph. The most important thing I'm going to tell you guys is when it comes to refrigerants, you guys need to do your own research. Do not trust the supply houses when they tell you, oh yeah, that works good. Just put it on R22, drop it on top and it works fine. Don't listen to them, okay? And also don't listen to the supply houses when they say this is the best refrigerant out there. It's okay to use their opinion and keep it in one part of your brain, but you also need to do some research yourself. And it's been a while since I've researched any alternative refrigerants, but every one that I have researched, if you read the fine print, they specifically tell you that they work best with polyester oil, okay? Plain and simple. So bottom line, if you're gonna do a retrofit, read the installation instructions, read the manufacturer's installation instructions, Google it yourself and read what it has to say, okay? Keep in mind that some of the drop-ins for R22 or insert brand, flavor, whatever refrigerant work better at certain conditions and worse at other conditions. So make sure you read that information, okay? I'm going to leave it at that and let's go ahead and get on with some more questions in here. So let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. Don't replace record. All right. Seeing what I'm missing in here. It doesn't look like I'm missing much, so I'm going to go ahead and get to some more questions in here. All right. Carrier units. So I get this question all the time. So I had a YouTube question from someone, and I work on a lot of carrier package units. And I get this all the time. Why don't the manufacturers put a chase nipple in some of the electrical areas where the wires pass through the metal panels? Okay, they actually do. It's hard to see on camera, but a lot of the carrier units, they actually have a recessed little piece of metal that's stamped so that way the wires can pass through it without it having a chase nipple on it. So the wires actually are protected. Now, it really depends on the person that's doing the installation of the equipment. So you need to look at it. And I wish I had a picture right now, but if you look at the metal, it's not just flat metal with a hole drilled through it. It's been stamped to where it has a rounded edge and the wires are meant to run through it. And it's kind of like a semi-chase nipple on its own. You do have to pay attention because there is other places in the electrical cabinet where you need to have a chase nipple. Okay. A chase nipple would be something that would go through an electrical passageway, and it has a rounded beveled edge to it. So that way the wires don't rub out on sharp surfaces. Okay. So just keep that in mind. And then there's also some other fittings that you can use on the backside of a chase nipple, like a plastic connector that kind of keeps it protected too. So, let's see. Premix blends is like PFC 1100 and PFC 550 are 12 to 1600 a jug for some cryo chillers. Sometimes takes more than one jug. Yeah, so I've never done a lot of cryo unit. Actually, I've never done any cryo units. I've done a few ultra low ones where they had like 2 component refrigerants. Anything that had more than that, I would tell them to get a hold of someone that specializes in that stuff. But yeah, when you work on the ultra low stuff and some of the medical scientific stuff, they do have some weird proprietary blends. So it's very interesting. And they'll have specific instructions on mixing the refrigerants too, like add this refrigerant and this refrigerant first, then add that. It's really weird. So, but yeah, just don't mix refrigerants. Bottom line, guys. Okay. Let's see. Jason Johnson says Copeland doesn't approve MO99 in any of their compressors unless it's a discus semi-hermetic. And you bring up a good point, Jason. So a lot of manufacturers of these refrigerants will use deceptive marketing. Okay, they will say manufacturer approved, but they won't tell you what manufacturer. Or they'll say Copeland approved. Well, like Jason said, one refrigerant might be approved for a certain compressor, but that's it. It doesn't mean it's approved across the board. Okay, so be very cautious about that stuff. It's interesting because, and again, it's been a while since I've done some research, but I was working on a train in Telepack, like a big package unit, a couple years back, probably about 4 years ago. And I had a customer that it had a refrigerant leak. And so I had quoted him to repair it. And he goes, you know what, dude? He goes, you were way too expensive. I had another guy come in and he said this. And I said, that's fine. No problem. You can use the other guy. I said, but just be wary, because at the time, Trane had literature. Trane, the actual supply house, they have their own supply house, right? They have literature that says warranty will be void if any alternative refrigerants. Now, to this day, it may have changed, but back then, their literature specifically said this compressor's warranty will be void if you use an alternative refrigerant. Okay, they didn't want you doing anything. I found it ironic, though, at the time, because Trane was selling alternative refrigerants, and they weren't even selling R22 anymore at the supply house at the time, or something like that. They were selling alternative refrigerants and pushing them, but yet the manufacturer's installation instructions said that it would void the warranty, okay? Now, you and I both know that a technician could probably figure out how to charge a system up, and how would Trane really know if you use the wrong refrigerant or different things like that, but it's just easier just to follow the manufacturer's instructions, make your life easier, okay? Kyer, thank you so very much for that super chat. Your question, can a compressor also be considered a Stirling engine? Is there an education kit for those who want to learn more about HVAC? If you want to learn more about HVAC, I would encourage you to go over to my buddy Brian's website. It's hvacrschool.com. Okay, check out his website. He also has a YouTube channel called HVAC School. Brian has a lot of beginner to intro information and videos and tech notes and different things like that. If you're interested in getting a foot in the door in HVAC, that would be a good way to learn a little bit. And Brian does a really good job of breaking down basic components and theory and different things like that. Much better than I can ever do. So I'd encourage you to go over there. What happens if you run an air defrost on a walk-in freezer? Would it become a bigger issue? Air defrost on a walk-in freezer? Well, let's break that one down and think about it. A walk-in freezer, the typical general product walk-in freezer, will run to a space temperature of negative 10 degrees for most part. Okay, if they want to keep ice cream in there, it's going to be negative 10 degrees. All right. So if it's at negative 10 degrees and your evaporator has a 10-degree TD, that means your evaporator temperature is going to be negative 20 degrees, okay? So if you tried to do an off-cycle defrost on a walk-in freezer that had a negative 10-degree space temperature, let's say you shut off the refrigeration system, then you're moving air across that evaporator trying to defrost it. But the problem is that ice forms at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? We're keeping it at negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So turning it off and just cycling air across it, it's not going to do a single thing because you're cycling air that's colder than freezing across that evaporator. That's why we will often have to use a hot gas defrost and or an electric defrost on walk-in freezers, okay? Got to really think about it, and it's pretty basic once you break it down. On a walk-in cooler that maintains a 35-degree space temperature, the evaporator is going to get down to 25 degrees when it's running. But in the off cycle, when it's not calling for cooling, we can bring the temperature up to 40 degrees, which is well above 32 degrees, which is the freezing point. So we can cycle air. So in a walk-in cooler, it is very common for us to use an off-cycle defrost, meaning that it's just going to circulate air across it. But on a freezer, the space temperature is too cold to do an off-cycle defrost, so you have to do some sort of an electric and or hot gas defrost to try to melt any condensation or frost buildup. And frost buildup on a freezer is inevitable. You have to have electric defrost or hot gas defrost built into it. Typically about 4 times a day, sometimes more, anywhere from 28 minutes to 45-minute defrost. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question for you. All right, let's see what else we got in here. I already answered that one. Okay, cool. So I answered this question. Now, I had an interesting question from another person that is not an HVAC technician, but he just had a genuine question. And I am totally open to non-HVAC technicians asking questions. I'm cool with it. Let's go for it. Send me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Leave a comment on a video. Put it in the live stream. I'm totally cool with it. So his question was, can you use dye to find leaks like they do in automotive air conditioning? Yes, you can use dye. I don't like using dye. Dye makes a mess. Most people don't know how to properly use dye, and or depending on the compressor manufacturer, you might void a warranty if you use dye, okay? I avoid using dye at all. I do have some in my van. It has probably been a good 5 years since I've used it. I can count on my hands how many times I've used dye in my career, and it always ends up in a mess, meaning that when you take off your service gauges, it sprays everywhere. It's just a nightmare. Avoid dye at all costs, in my opinion, okay? But who knows? I could just be a dummy. I know a lot of people use dye with great success. I just don't like it because it makes a nasty mess and it sprays crap everywhere. And yeah, I just don't like it, okay? So that answers that question. Chris had asked me, this one I got a lot too, actually. Chris asked me, why don't I install a filter on my refrigeration racks to keep all the dirt from going to the condenser and plugging it up, okay? The size of the filter that you would have to install to pass the proper amount of air across that refrigeration rack's condenser would have to be huge. We're talking bigger than 6 inches because the amount of air that flows across that condenser is pretty high. So installing filters on there, they would plug up within a day. No joke, moving air across there. So yeah, I mean, it's a good concept installing some sort of air filtration, but that would imply that the customers actually have you come out and routinely change those filters. So no, we just leave no filters. And I will do the same too. If I have restaurants that are not doing preventative maintenance, I will actually take the filters off of the self-contained condensers because they plug up too fast and just turn into nuisance service calls too. So hopefully that answers your question for you. Let me go ahead and see what else we got in here. Jason had asked me, what's up with the cheesy music for my brazing montage? You know, I just like to have fun with my videos sometimes. 80s music does something for me, like the electronic syntho or techno, whatever, electronic music, synthesizer crap. I don't know, it just hits me in a spot or something like that and reminds me of some childhood thing or something like that that I like. So I just like to put music in every once in a while. I don't do it all the time. It is what it is. It's just an expression of the way that I feel at the time that I made the video. So ooh, this one I got a lot, okay? In my recent video, I swear the cooks and their drawers. That's what it was titled. I changed the compressor. That was actually this last Saturday. Video started on Friday and ended on Saturday. It was the beginning of my marathon service call day, because Saturday, I think I worked 12 hours on Saturday. It was a long day. The question was, when I was testing the compressor, did I check the potential relay? And actually, yes, I did. Unfortunately, I don't always get everything on camera when I'm diagnosing and different things like that, but it is very important. If you are working on a single phase compressor that has starting components, in my situation that was going off on locked rotor amps, okay, it is very important to make sure that you check the potential relay or the current relay, whichever style it has, to make sure that the start capacitor is dropping out of the circuit properly. Because if you don't drop the start capacitor out and you're feeding the start winding all the time, it will go off on locked rotor amp, thermal overload, and blow the breaker, okay? So in my situation, yes, I did. And the way that you would check a potential relay is by just doing a voltage check across it, okay? If you check the terminals, you can look at a schematic and you can test it. You can see when the capacitor is in the circuit and when it drops out. So I measured and verified that the capacitor was being fed. So the start capacitor was sending voltage to the compressor, and then it was dropping out, but the compressor still wasn't starting, okay? So yes, I did check that, and I even tried to replace the start capacitor because it was reading high for some reason. There was something funky going on there. So I used one of those AMRAD universal start capacitors, just a single capacitor by itself, wired it into the circuit, made sure that we had the proper capacitance. We did, and it still wouldn't start. So yes, I did check that before I changed the compressor. So let's look at the chat. How often do I get a service call way away from my service area? I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, it's hard to say. We get them sometimes we don't. I mean, you know, I don't know, bud. All right. How often do I change my vacuum pump oil? Joe, I change it whenever it needs to be changed. So I use the Field Piece VPX7 vacuum pump. Before that, it was the VP85, and both of them have a clear reservoir that you can see the vacuum pump oil. Now, I'm not talking about a little sight glass on the end of the vacuum pump that has a tiny little thing, because those sight glasses are super misleading. There's a couple manufacturers that use those. And if you ever have one, if you guys have one of those pumps, look at what the color of the oil is in the sight glass and then pour the oil into a cup and it'll be a totally different color, okay? So those sight glasses are so misleading. But when you use the clear reservoirs, Field Piece has a clear reservoir, and then Appion has a clear reservoir too. It's a lot easier to see the oil. But not only are we looking for the clarity of the oil, but we're also looking at the performance of the evacuation. So when you're using a micron gauge, you can actually tell that, hey, the vacuum's stalling out. It's not pulling down anymore. Let's try changing the oil. You change the oil, then all of a sudden you see the micron levels start dropping again. If the oil gets saturated with enough moisture, it won't be able to drop the level of the vacuum very efficiently anymore, okay? So it really depends on each evacuation. I would say at a minimum, I change it every 2 to 3 uses. By going to some of these newer style vacuum pumps, you don't have to add a whole quart of oil or anything like that. I buy oil by the pint now. It's tiny little containers, and you just pour. It won't even take a whole pint in the Field Piece pump. It's a tiny amount. So it's super easy to do it and change it, and it's not a big deal at all. All right, let me see what else we got in here. It was not you, Jason Johnson. Don't worry. I see that. What's the purpose of changing vacuum pump oil so often? Well, I kind of just explained it. It's J. Leroy Lacey. It's really about the contamination of the oil, okay? Once the oil gets contaminated with so much moisture, it doesn't help in dropping of the micron levels of the system anymore. So once it gets contaminated, you change it out, and then you'll find that your vacuum pump will perform better. Right. How often do I get customers due to my videos? Never. I've had a few people email me because of my videos and ask me to service them, but I'll be honest with you, since I started YouTube in 2017, I haven't taken on... I don't think I've taken on any new customers since 2017. I can't think that I don't think I have. I haven't been able to keep up since 2017 with the workload that I have today. So, Jose Rivera, thank you so very much for that super chat. You guys humble me with your guys' support, and I'm so thankful for it, okay? I have to say that every single time. You guys, the easiest way to support this channel is simply watch the videos from start to finish without skipping through anything, okay? By doing that, you allow YouTube to pay me. Okay, you guys are super generous. There's other ways to support it too. You can donate via super chat like some people have. You can donate via PayPal, YouTube channel memberships. You can go to my website hvacrvideos.com and you can buy hats and shirts and different things like that. But I will continue to make these videos with or without the support. The support is greatly appreciated, but if you don't, it's okay, guys. I will continue to share the little bit of knowledge that I have with you. But you guys just humble me so much, okay? I am a big proponent of sharing knowledge. There was a comment recently on somewhere on Facebook from someone, and he posted something along the lines of, you know, he was asking a question and I don't think he was directing it at me. He was just asking it in general in a group, but he said, you know, how do you guys feel about these guys sharing information on YouTube? And, you know, I kind of started politely talking back and forth with him. And his argument was that he paid a lot of money for his education, and he didn't find it healthy for me to give that education away for free. Vegas HVACR guy, holy moly, thank you so very much. I believe that's Chad, Vegas HVACR guy, right? I believe you are Chad, if I remember right. And thank you so very much for that super chat. That is amazing. So this other guy that I was talking with, you know, he felt that because he paid so much money for his education that it shouldn't be given away for free on YouTube. You know, I'm not sharing everything. I'm going to share my knowledge no matter what. And him and I parted ways, you know, and I was fine. You know, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to change his mind and he wasn't going to change my mind. And, you know, it's okay. It's okay for us to have different opinions, but I'm going to continue to share what little bit of knowledge that I have in hopes that maybe you guys won't make the same mistakes as I have, because I've made some really bad mistakes. I've made mistakes that if I made them today, I would lose customers. I mean, I work for myself, but if I worked for someone else, I could potentially get fired. Those are the mistakes that I made early in my career. So if I can keep someone from doing those same things that I did and maybe save them from getting fired, I'm going to do so because I just like to help. Anyone fix RTU carrier train plugged metering devices solutions? Heating pistons, replace coil, open and clean each orifice on header. So Rainbow Gypsy 71 is asking about the actuator style metering devices on train and carrier units, or fixed orifice or actuator headers, or whatever you want to call them. Train and carrier both have this style where they have a liquid line going into the evaporator with multiple, it's got a liquid header temperatures, which leads to oil breakdown. When the oil starts to break down, it can start to wipe crap off the walls inside the system. It can start to get dirty, and as it flows through the system, it'll start to restrict restrict the orifices, right? The fixed orifice metering devices. So, have I ever cleared a fixed orifice metering device successfully? No, I have not successfully cleared a fixed orifice metering device. I have tried using nitrogen. I've tried heating up with the torch and different things like that. It has gotten better, but it has never cleared it completely. In my experience, the only way to properly and fully clear a fixed orifice metering device that's on a multiple header like the actuator style is to replace the metering device, okay? I have 2 units right now that I will be making videos about when I do it, where I'm just going to change the whole evaporator. Because you can buy the liquid header with like the multiple places and you got to get in there and cut them and braze them in. The easiest way is just change the whole evaporator. These are 5-ton units. They're easy. So I'm going to be doing 2 of those, and I'm going to have 2 evaporators. So I'll do some experiments cutting up the metering devices and playing with them, and maybe we can do some experiments about trying to clear them when it's out of the system and different things like that. Hopefully that answers your question. If I say anything that anybody has questions about, if I'm not paying attention to the chat enough, if I'm not seeing your questions, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I will try to get back with you, okay? All right, let's see what else we got in here. Looking for questions. Remember, if you have questions, make sure you put them in caps lock. So Mario says, what causes cylinders filling up with oil and locking up the compressor? I don't know about cylinders filling up with oil, but I don't know about that question. But I will say what causes damage in compressors. I wouldn't say is so much oil. I've never seen a cylinder fill up with oil. Okay, I don't know the answer to that one, but I will say that liquid migration can be a problem in the off cycle. Refrigerant in colder climates and stuff will tend to migrate to the compressor, so you have to have some sort of means of mitigation to try to prevent that liquid from migrating to the compressor. Crankcase heaters, solenoid valves in the off cycle, different things like that. Proper refrigerant charge and proper piping practices will definitely help with that. But as far as cylinders filling up with oil, Mario, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that question, bud. My buddy Ralph is in here right now. So I don't know if you were in here earlier, Ralph, but I was talking about mixing refrigerants. So Ralph is Dallas fan. Again, I posted his email. If you guys have any questions refrigerant related, alternatives to R22, 410A, 404, feel free to send Ralph. I just put his email in the chat right now, okay? So at the beginning of this, and I'll cover it again, I went off on a little bit of rant about mixing refrigerants. Never is it acceptable to mix refrigerants unless you are instructed to do so by the manufacturer, okay? Now, what I mean by that is working on some refrigeration systems and ultra-low systems, they might have proprietary blends of refrigerants and they might require a field mixture. That is the only exception to mixing refrigerants in the field. When it comes to replacing R22 with 407C or insert flavor of refrigerant you want, you never put the other replacement refrigerant on top of the R22 or 404 or whatever. You do not do that in the field, guys, okay? We are not engineers. You're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting the next guy up for failure. That is not a good thing to do. So do not mix refrigerants. If you guys do have questions, feel free to send Ralph an email. He can better educate you on some of that stuff, okay? Let me see what else. Do I do hot side work? No, I do not, Don. I only do cold side work. What causes a compressor to hit 500 PSI on a train scroll? Restriction or bad compressor? Vegas HVACR guy. 500 PSI on a train scroll? I mean, it depends on the outdoor ambient temperature. You know, I wouldn't push a 410A system hitting 500 PSI. That doesn't, I mean, on a really, really hot day, you know, it just depends. If it was an R22 system, yeah, you got some issues there. So if you have systems like, and remember something, sometimes when it's really, really hot, you can get jelly brain. It can get hard to remember what you're doing. Everything takes longer when it's really hot outside. When you're working with refrigerants, if you're working on an air conditioner and it's just not making sense, okay, step back and think about it for a minute. Step back and stop what you're doing. Stop adding gas and think about it, okay? In that situation, if I'm working on an air conditioner and the pressures just don't make sense, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and recover the refrigerant out of the system, okay? If it's something that I've been working on consistently and it's been my system and I know nobody else is working on it, I'm not going to worry about it being mixed refrigerants, okay? If my company's been working on it, we don't mix refrigerants. I have confidence in that. If it's another company's air conditioner or you're a second opinion or this is the first time you worked on it, the first thing is investigate and think, is it possible that someone mixed refrigerants, okay? Recover the refrigerant and start over. Pull a proper evacuation, change the dryer, weigh in new virgin refrigerant, and start over. Now, if I'm struggling with the system and I know that I've been the only person to work on it, I will recover the refrigerant and then put the same refrigerant back in, but I'll weigh it in according to manufacturer's specs, okay? Just be very cautious about that. But if you have the slightest hunch that someone might have mixed it, there's ways that you can check to see if you have mixed refrigerants, but with some of the R22 flavors that replace R22 or the replacements, the pressure temperature relationship is very, very close to R22, so it can be a little bit difficult to use some of the methods. But one of the ways on an air conditioner, if you want to check to see if the refrigerant is what it's supposed to be, what you can do on an air conditioner is you can turn the system off. Now, this can take some time. You turn the entire system off, you turn on the indoor blower motor, and you turn on the condenser fan motors with no compressors running, okay? And you open up all the panels to the AC, and you let the same air go across the evaporator, you let the same air go across the condenser. This needs to happen for about 20 minutes to a half an hour to bring the entire system temperature to the same thing. So the evaporator air needs to be, and the evaporator temperature needs to be the same as the condenser, assuming there's no solenoid valves and different things like that. So this is really only going to work on a package unit, okay? Once you've done that, then you can put your gauges on the system and you can look at your static pressures. Your static pressures are going to be the standing pressures without the compressor running, again, assuming that there's no restrictions, no solenoid valves. And then you can compare that looking at the outdoor ambient temperature, the air going across the evaporator and the condenser. And if you look at a pressure chart, your pressure should be dead on with the temperature of the outdoor air, okay? But again, that doesn't always work, and you really have to use your brain when doing that to assume that there's no solenoid valves. That's not necessarily going to work on a walk-in cooler unless you really open up all the solenoid valves, and it's not very practical on split systems because how do you get the evaporator to be the exact same temperature as the condenser on a split system? It doesn't really add up. That's really only going to work on a package unit, and even then, it's not as practical, and it can be a little difficult. That's where digital gauges will really come into play, because on an analog scale, it can be hard to get down to the exact pressure. But on a digital scale, as long as it's calibrated and working properly, you can get a lot closer. But even still, with some of these replacements for R22, can be a little bit difficult because the pressure temperature relationship can be like within, you know, a PSI or two. So keep that in mind. All right. Let me see what else we got going on in here. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm looking to see if I missed anything else. Why are some PoE compressors approved for R22? Pat, you're going to find that pretty much every replacement compressor out there now is going to be multi-refrigerant. PoE oil works fine with R22, so there's nothing wrong with that. So if you buy a new compressor today, majority of the time it's going to come with polyester oil or PoE oil in it, okay? Majority of the time. And it's safe to use with R22 so long as it's rated for R22. So keep that in mind, okay? Let me see what else we got going on here. When I install an aftermarket condenser fan motor, do I take steps to make it look OEM, Cyborg Sheep? Well, there's only so much you can do with an aftermarket condenser fan motor to make it look OEM. But obviously, the way you install it, you want to install it the best. I don't like using aftermarket condenser fan motors. If I can, I prefer to use an OEM for a couple different reasons. The biggest is the stack on the motor, the height of the motor typically is too tall. So that puts the blade too far down in the shroud. So that way it starts to recirculate air instead of blow it out of the shroud. So keep that in mind when you're using aftermarket. I try to use OEM, and I always look for an excuse to change aftermarket motors to an OEM motor whenever possible. I notice performance increases when I go back to the OEM, especially with the ones where the blade was sitting too low in the shroud. You'll tend to see higher head pressure, and that can, you know, affect your system operation. All right. Let's see. Have I ever smoked? How do I deal with the stress of a job? Mike Fox. No, I don't smoke. I will use, like, obviously in California, medical marijuana is legal, so it's okay to use it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's technically a gray area and stuff. But I have used, like, my wife will take like CBD and different things like that. So I've taken like gummies and things to kind of help me to calm down and not stress out so much. But never smoked per se, right? But I will take a gummy every once in a while to kind of help me to relax. I definitely need it. I mean, to be honest with you, there's times in this industry when, you know, you just need to relax. And right now, like, I'm super stressed at work and stuff. So that definitely helps me to calm down. So, let's see. Who is this movie actor? Where is Chris? Yes, I do have hair. I know the internet is breaking. Everybody's freaking out. All right, let's see what I'm missing here. Of course, there's a new work order. And please don't be an emergency. No, it's not. Okay, cool. It's a stupid work order. Have I already answered that one, son? What do I do with all the used HVAC equipment I've replaced? So I will call a scrap guy, and the scrap guy comes and takes it. So whenever I do AC installs and stuff like that, typically it'll be the guy that delivers the AC. We have a pretty good agreement with him. He works with the manufacturer of the air conditioners too. So when he delivers the equipment, he'll take all the old equipment and scrap it for us. We don't ask for any money in return because he takes it. The alternative, when we used to change air conditioners and different things like that, is we used to rental trucks and then go and scrap it ourselves. But what we found is the cost and the labor that we would pay someone to drive that rental truck, to rent the rental truck and all that stuff. Most of the time when we scrapped it, the money that we got pretty much paid for the rental truck. So we just give it to the scrap guy and let him deal with it. I'm too busy to try to keep up with everything else. Let's see. Any RSCS classes coming up? No, RSCS still is on hold. Nobody is allowed to really have in-person meetings at this time. So it's going to take some time before before they approve in-person meetings. Basically, everybody's afraid to jump the gun and start having in-person meetings, especially in California. They're just afraid of lawsuits and all that crap. So let's see what else. Get a haircut, it'll lower my head pressure. That's pretty funny. What would happen if I pulled a vacuum through a filter dryer? Nothing. I mean, it's just going to be more of a restriction, you know? That's pretty much it. I want to talk about finding the root cause of a problem. And I'm going to give an example, okay? So I had a service technician recently go out to a service call. The complaint was a water leak, okay? This is a newer service technician, so I'm still kind of educating him on how to do things and stuff. And so he went out on a water leak service call, and, you know, when he got there, there was no water leaking, okay? So I instructed him some steps to go through to try to duplicate the water leak. Okay, first off, and the complaint was from an air conditioner. It was leaking from a vent. Okay, but when he got up there, all the drain pans were clear. The P traps were open. You know, I mean, everything was good. He couldn't find anything wrong. He couldn't find any water in the ductwork. So the first thing when we're going out there, we want to find the root cause, right? And we want to get as much information from the managers as possible. Okay, we don't just walk up onto the roof and start looking. We go down and we have a discussion. I try to build relationships with my managers so that way they trust me, right? So we go in and I start talking, and there's also a way to ask questions of the customer too. And even if you think they're not answering your question correctly or truthfully, ask them another way. Ask them a few different ways, and you'll get to the answer eventually, okay? So with my technician, I instructed him, okay, first off, you can't find the water leak, so I want you to go to every AC, and I want you to take the hose, and I want you to fill up the drain pan, and I want to see how fast it drains. And then, you know, as he's going through, I said, is it draining? Yeah, it's draining, okay. So then what I wanted him to do, oftentimes in my area, you need to understand how your systems work, is you got to understand that we have common drains. So our air conditioners will all go to one drain, and then they'll drain to a floor sink in the building. They could have 6 air conditioners all going to 1.125" drain line or a 7/8 inch drain line, you know? So it's important in my experience that we clean the main drain too. So where it goes common, you got to blow all those out. But the problem is if you try to blow one AC out and try to blow down into the building, it'll come up in another AC. So you really need to look past the easy, I can't figure out what's wrong, call me if it happens again. You need to dig into things when you're going out to these service calls, okay? So you always want to try to find the root cause. And even if, like for instance, the things that I had my technician check from experience. So he went through all the drains, couldn't find anything wrong, okay? So then I said, hey, go through the air conditioners, make sure all the compressors are running. Here's things that people don't think about. If you have a slab coil on a package unit and you have 2 stages, the second stage is usually on the top, the first stage is on the bottom. If the first stage stops working, the coil goes dry, but the second stage will still condensate. Then what can happen is as the water drips down the second stage coil, it then runs into the part that's the first stage. And because it's dry, that water will fall off the coil down into the ductwork. So in this situation, we had a first stage compressor not working properly, and that was the cause of the water leak. So it was easy to go in there and say, there's no drains plugged up, there's no water in the drain pans, call me if it happens again. But I don't stop at just that. We investigate further. Remember, we want to solve the problem, not the symptom. The symptom is the water leaking, right? Down the vent or whatever, right? And we don't see it, so I don't know. But maybe we can look further, right? We dig into the root cause and try to figure out what was going on. In our situation, the first stage compressor wasn't working, and that water was dripping off the coil, okay? You got to stop and think about this stuff. I can't tell you how bad a callback is. Callbacks happen, right? Or recalls, whatever you want to call them, but it ruins your reputation with the customer, okay? If you have one callback, even if you're the best technician, if you have a second callback and a third callback, right? And maybe it's the customer's fault, but the customer only sees you and they think it's your fault. So go the extra mile, do your best to make sure that the customer realizes, you know, and especially cover your butt if you run into a situation where you can't duplicate the problem again. You tell the customer, look, I could stay here all day, but I think it'd be smart if you just monitor it and call me back if it happens again, and give them the option. And then they say, no, I want you to stay here. Okay, cool. I'll stay here and I'll watch it. There's always a possibility I'm not going to see it again, but we'll watch it for as many hours as you want me to, as the bill keeps getting bigger and bigger. Most of the time, the customer is going to say, yeah, I'll call you back if it happens again. But giving them that option, once you've done everything you can to try to find the problem and you can't find it, giving them that option covers your butt. because you get it in writing and you have it written down. And then that way you have a discussion with the customer and keep them in the loop the entire time. Don't just disappear onto the roof for 8 hours and then come down and say, yeah, I can't figure it out. Go down there after the first or second hour and explain, man, I'm really struggling to find this problem, but here's what's happening. Give them just enough information that you're not overloading their brain, but give them some technical information to make them realize that you are doing something, you know, and make them feel like they're part of the problem solving. Offer them. Say, hey, would you like to come up onto the roof? I'll show you what I'm going through. Most of the time my customers say no, but every once in a while they take me up on the offer. Yeah, I want to see what's on the roof. Okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's walk up here, you know, and show them. It's all about customer service, right? And covering your butt, making them part of the decision-making process, or even making them think they're part of the decision-making process. Okay. A lot of the times when I'm working with some of these big restaurant chains, you have a manager that, in all honesty, has no power within that restaurant. All he's there to do is to herd the little kids and tell them to stop spitting gum out and do stupid stuff in the restaurant. As far as mechanical and facilities decisions, that actually happens on a corporate level. I don't work for the managers. I work for the corporate office, but I don't tell the managers that. I still have a relationship with the managers. I still keep them in the loop. And I share enough information to make them feel like they're important, right? Even though they're not the ones making the decision, it's all about the way that you treat the customers and getting to the root cause. That's the most important thing. So, all right, let's see what else we got going in the chat. Let me see what else we got in here. What am I missing? All right, cool. I'm going to get to my stuff. So Jacob made a post, and this is a good point. So Jacob made a funny post, you know, just like a comment in my YouTube comments about how the customer is always in the hurry, are you done yet? Okay. You know, customers sometimes will try to pressure you, and they'll tell you like, yeah, you're taking too long. You know, what do you, how come you're taking so long? How come it's not getting done faster? Again, it's all about communication and talking with the customer. Okay. So you always want to keep them in the loop. Okay. Let's see. And I have a note on here. Turn that off real quick. Okay, cool. Let's see. There's a question in here. I see the question, guys, right? I see the question from John Deere fan, and he's asking about how many defrosts. Okay. Yeah, I've seen walk-in freezers with too many defrosts. Okay. But to be honest with you, I was avoiding that question, okay, because we keep repeating those same questions every single stream. And while I appreciate the questions, you got to keep some of them to a minimum when it comes to the same stuff over and over and over again, okay? So I'm cool with a question here and there, but if it's the same questions every single stream, it gets a little bit repetitive, okay? And I don't mean to sound rude, but it just comes across that way sometimes, okay? So have I seen a defrost clock with too many defrosts? Yes, I have seen a defrost clock with too many defrosts, okay? If you have too many defrosts on a walk-in freezer system, it can cause weird condensation issues within the box. It can cause high temperatures, different things like that, okay? So yes, I have seen it before. I cannot think of a specific instance in which I've seen that, okay? All right. Let's see what else we got in here. How do I charge a unit with no metering device like on a Carrier unit? Mr. Green, okay, so every refrigeration or air conditioning system is going to have a metering device of some sort, okay? It's going to be an expansion valve, or it's going to be a piston or a fixed orifice style metering device. Plain and simple, okay? It can be a automatic expansion valve, or it can be a thermostatic expansion valve, it can be an electronic expansion valve, or it can be some sort of a fixed orifice metering device. But it has to have some sort of metering device, okay? So Carrier package units, they have fixed orifice metering devices in the liquid actuator, okay? So when you are doing a system with a fixed orifice metering device, okay, you charge by target superheat, right? Target superheat is going to take a few variables, outdoor ambient, indoor wet bulb, and it's going to come to a conclusion of a target superheat. If you are working on a system with a expansion valve, you're typically going to look at subcooling. These are air conditioning systems, okay? If you are working with a refrigeration system that has a receiver, then you're not so much going to pay attention to subcooling. You are going to look at it and you're going to use it as a metric as part of the whole big picture, but you're going to look for a clear sight glass on a refrigeration system that has an expansion valve, okay? Now, you have to use your brain when it goes beyond that, because sometimes You can have other components in the system, such as a head pressure control valve, that causes the system to need more refrigerant than just a clear sight glass, okay? But we're not going to go into that right now. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Jordan Werner, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That is amazing. I really appreciate it. Do I work with building automation drives or PLCs often? No, Dylan, I don't work on very much. I work on a few drives, but not much building automation at all. All right, so... No, nothing wrong with that, John Deere fan. I don't mind questions at all, dude. It's just sometimes some of them are just like the same questions every single stream. So I don't mean to alienate you. I was trying to avoid that, but I had to address it eventually, okay? So no, I appreciate you in here and I appreciate questions, but it's just the same questions every single time. It just kind of throws me off every once in a while. So nothing wrong with that, okay? All right, so let me see what else. If a RTU has... 2 cooling circuits, would that mean there's 2 separate condensers and evaporators? Not necessarily, but well, yes, in a way, but oftentimes they will use the same physical condenser, but just separate it into 2 circuits, meaning that there's a liquid header going to half of the condenser and there's another liquid header going to the other half of the condenser. So if that makes sense. Adam Wortman, thank you so very much for that super chat. John Deere fan, kayak updates. No, I really kind of gave up on the kayaks and actually got paddle boards. My whole family got paddle boards and they're a little bit more easy to transport. So we have 2 hard shell paddle boards. They're like 10.5-foot ones. And then we have 2 soft inflatable paddle boards. And we try to take them out as often as we can. But like we took them out over 4th of July weekend because I got one from each of my kids. I have 2 daughters and then my wife and myself, we all have them now. So let me see what else in here. Can I explain Mitsubishi D700 VFD's important parameters on RTUs? Parker, that's more of a manufacturer-specific thing. I really don't, off the top of my head, have the exact parameters that you should check when it comes to the VFDs on these package units. You're going to want to lean on the manufacturer because they have specific settings that you want you to set them for. Can you replace hot gas bypass with a fan pressure control? I wouldn't, because if the system was designed and engineered with hot gas bypass, it's there for a reason. It's more than likely a capacity control thing. So fan cycling, I wouldn't do it without talking to the manufacturer. You're going to be ending up re-engineering that system. I mentioned in a video that AC refrigeration systems are dirty. What did you mean by that? That AC refrigeration systems are dirty. I don't know what you mean by that, Cyborg Sheep. I can't remember that phrase that I used. I will often say that we have dirty power going to our package units on the roof, and that's why we have many electrical failures, but I can't remember why I said AC refrigeration systems are dirty. Feel free to send me an email. We can talk about it more. Let's see. Why does the evap coils fill with oil? If your evaporator coil is filling with oil, it's typically because of an improperly sized refrigeration lines leaving the evaporator going to the compressor, typically, okay? There's something going on there. It could be airflow issues, different things like that. But if you're having oil logging in your system, oil naturally flows through the system, okay? And it flows with the refrigerant especially. But this can be something you have to worry about when it comes to some of these refrigerant alternatives, like some of these R22 replacements and stuff. The oil might not be miscible. It might not travel with the new refrigerant through the system. So this is something you need to be very careful about when you're selecting certain refrigerant replacements. On top of that, the system needs to be properly sized. The suction line, it really does matter. You know, the liquid line and the suction line. Too small of a liquid line can cause a restriction. Too small of a suction line can cause a restriction. Too big of a suction line can cause oil return issues. I mean, you can have oil return on too small of a suction line too. So everything has to be properly sized. And something to think about when you're changing from refrigerants. Let's just say 448A. That's a new refrigerant that I'm using to replace R404A on my new installs, right? 448A has very similar characteristics to R22, okay? So if you go from 404 to 448A, oftentimes you're going to find that you need to basically reduce the size of your refrigeration lines. Oftentimes the liquid line and the suction line. Now, you can get away with having oversized lines, but it can lead to issues in the future. Massive amount of extra refrigerant that the system doesn't necessarily need. That can be too big of a liquid line issue, right? Because your liquid line still has to have a solid column of liquid. So if you have a really big liquid line, you're going to have a lot of refrigerant to keep that solid liquid line. right solid column. So it's really important that we size our refrigeration lines accordingly. You do not just look at the condensing unit line size and assume that's what size it needs to be all the way to the evaporator. That's not always the case, okay? So let's say you have a walk-in cooler that has an evaporator and you have a walk-in cooler that has a condenser on the roof. The line sizes might be different, okay? And you might need to change the line size on the vertical riser depending on how long it is and how high it is and different things like that. So sizing your refrigeration lines is very critical to proper system operation. All right, let me see what else. What are the pros and cons of EEVs with or without liquid line solenoid valves on a pump down system of a walk-in cooler? Well, the con of using an EEV without a solenoid valve is that that EEV has to close down to shut off the flow of refrigerant, okay? And oftentimes, depending on the manufacturer, very early in the brain fart right now, but very early when they started putting out electronic expansion valves on walk-in coolers, what they found was that if you killed power to the evaporator coil mid-cycle, the expansion valve would stay open, okay? It would not shut. Now, if you have a liquid line solenoid valve, oftentimes if you shut off power, it will have a spring inside of it that shoves that solenoid valve shut, would cause the system to pump down. Now, some of the manufacturers of the EEVs started requiring that they put large capacitors in the circuit boards that would have enough power stored in them so that way if you turned off power to the evaporator, it would still drive that expansion valve shut. But sometimes it doesn't always happen. So I have witnessed on some heatcraft systems where if you shut off power to the evaporator coil while it's running, the liquid line, or I'm sorry, the EEV electronic expansion valve will stay open and it just keeps pumping refrigerant and it floods back to the compressor and it can cause compressor damage. So be very careful about putting power switches at the evaporators on some of these newer walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers, because if the customer goes in there and shuts off the switch and just thinks that they're shutting off the coil, whereas the old one that had a standard solenoid valve would shut it down, some of these new ones, those capacitors don't always close the EEV, okay? Whenever I'm working on systems with EEVs, electronic expansion valves, it's always hypercritical, especially more so than, in my opinion, than even on standard systems, that you braze with nitrogen, okay? It's so important because those EEVs, they throttle down to such a low rate that they can be easily become restricted or gummed up, and, you know, crap can get stuck in those things. So make sure you're brazing with nitrogen when you're working on these systems. All right. Let me see what else we got in here. Am I going to grow my hair like Bill? No, I don't think I'm going to grow it like Bill. I'm going to keep it somewhat short. I don't think it's going to get much longer than it is right now. Let me see. Can we get some more videos from the shop who makes the custom coolers? If I work there again, I haven't been doing a lot of work there. My dad has been doing some work, kind of keeping me out of there, so which has been good. Let's see. Hans Peterson, thank you so very much for that super chat. How would you help air conditioning units trying to cool in Death Valley with the temps at 130 degrees? Great question. So as the condensing temperature rises, our condensing temperature is directly affected by the outdoor ambient temperature. So recently in Death Valley, which is about 6 hours away from my house, they broke a world record of the highest ambient temperature in the world, okay? And I think they hit 130 and change or something like that. So if you were trying to operate an air conditioner in that climate, how could we help it? Knowing that the outdoor ambient directly affects the condensing temperature is directly affecting the cooling of the compressor. The higher the condensing temperature, the higher the suction gas returning back to the compressor that cools it off gets, which leads to oil issues and breakdown of the windings and eventually a catastrophic burnout of the compressor. So how can we keep a air conditioner operating as good as possible in higher ambient temperatures? By lowering the condensing temperature, okay? So we can do that artificially by putting on a pre-cooler. We can have evaporative coolers, swamp coolers, different things like that, blowing on the condenser. You can move condensers out of the sun. You can do stuff like that, but there's only so much you can do in high ambience. when it comes to using an evaporative cooler, it can be effective, but oftentimes groundwater temperatures will rise as outdoor ambient temperatures rise too. So it is a struggle, but you can do it. You can also engineer systems that can operate in that ambient, but they're going to be massively oversized, and they're typically going to have some sort of supplemental cooling like liquid injection and different things like that. So you can do it. It needs to be engineered properly. You're not going to be able to take an off-the-shelf package unit and just throw it out at 130-degree ambient temperature. It's not going to fly. It's not going to last more than a couple years, if that. But it is possible. So let me see what else we got in here. Let's see. Have I ever seen a HVAC unit used to keep audio video equipment? Yeah, I do. Kevin, I work in some restaurants, and I used to work in a hospital that had specific air conditioning equipment that would cool all the server equipment, all the servers. In some of the restaurants, they have server rooms because they have tons of TVs and satellite dishes and things like that. So they will have proprietary dedicated units that cool that equipment. When you're cooling electronic equipment, you need to be very careful, because you got to consider that you don't want it to be super humid, but you also don't want it to be too dry in the room. So you got to be careful about making sure that the equipment is sized appropriately, because you don't want it to dry out the air so much that it causes static electricity, because that's going to lead to component failure, circuit boards, and different things like that. At the same time, you don't want too much humidity in there, because then it's going to lead to condensation issues, which could cause electrical shorts and different issues too. So it needs to be sized appropriately for sure. I'm going to get to my questions that I have right here. So a viewer on my YouTube comments was talking about how when I was recovering my refrigerant, I was talking about using larger diameter hoses. And they were saying that they have made a subcooler that has helped them in speeding up their recovery time. Okay. So I have bought subcoolers. There's specific ones, like CPS makes one. They have some crazy name for it called a molecular transformator. It's the silliest name. It's literally a coil of copper that acts as a subcooler. It's got 2 refrigeration ports. You dunk it in water, and it basically subcools the refrigerant, changes it into a liquid as it's going into the tank. Okay. So what I find is, and I've had them in the past, I've made subcoolers and I've bought them. I had the CPS one. I think one of my guys still has it, but I find that I don't need that anymore. Even working out in 123-degree ambient, I can recover refrigerant just fine without using a subcooler. All you need to do is remove the restrictions from the system. Remove the Schraders, put a Schrader core removal tool on there. Remove the core depressors from your hoses if you're using standard hoses. And on the outlet of your gauges, let's think about this. Let's say you hook up standard gauges to the system as you're recovering the refrigerant, and you're recovering from the high side and the low side. You have 2 1/4-inch diameter hoses, right? And they're connecting together. And then you have a 1/4-inch process hose, the yellow hose, coming from your gauges going to the recovery machine. Well, common logic would tell you that if you have 2 1/4-inch hoses going together and then a 1/4-inch hose coming out, that's a restriction point, because you have the flow of 2 1/4-inch hoses going into 1 1/4-inch hose. So you can simply increase the process hose, the yellow hose, put a 3/8 diameter hose right there, and then have a 3/8 or bigger diameter hose coming out of the recovery machine going into the tank, and then set the tank in a bucket of ice water and run water across it the entire time. You will notice that you don't need a subcooler, because having the large diameter hoses is just enough most of the time. And again, I can be out in 123 degrees recovering R410A, and it does it no sweat at all, just because I have the tank in water and I have large diameter hoses. Okay. So you can use subcoolers, sure, right? Another problem that you will find with a subcooler or molecular transformator or whatever is that you now have a large amount of refrigerant stuck in that. So it's inevitable that when you're recovering refrigerant, you're always going to have refrigerant stuck between the machine and the tank, right? Because there's no way to really get all that refrigerant out of there. And if you put a subcooler in between there, that's going to cause even more refrigerant, because there's more volume for the refrigerant to get stuck in there. So you're going to end up venting a lot more refrigerant that way. So stick with the larger diameter hoses, and you're going to notice a huge difference. I'm not saying you can't use subcoolers or anything. They still work. So When I recover, when it comes to recovering, when I recover, someone had asked me a question, do you just recover down to 0 PSI or do you go lower? Well, if you remember from when you took your Section 608 exam, the EPA certification, they actually want you to recover well below 0 PSI, okay? But you have to be careful. In my situation, I was recently working on a refrigeration system that has refrigerant leaks in it, and I was recovering all the refrigerant out, and I stopped at 1 PSI. I shut the recovery off when it was at 1 PSI because the system had leaks in it. I did not want to pull it into a vacuum because then I would pull air in through the leaks in the system into my refrigerant and contaminate it. Because I was reusing the existing refrigerant, I stopped before I got below 0 PSI, okay? Because then I would have contaminated the refrigerant and wouldn't have been able to use it again. So keep that in mind when you are recovering. Zachary had emailed me asking him what's the fastest way to defrost a walk-in freezer evaporator. I find the fastest way is to use hot water, okay? Remove all the fan motors, all the blades, all the guards. Run hot water through the evaporator while not getting any water on the ground in the box. It's a slow process defrosting an evaporator because oftentimes the drain pan will start to fill up really quick, okay? So the first thing you want to do when you're going to defrost an evaporator, make sure the drain is clear. Fill up the drain pan, make sure it drains, then start defrosting the coil, paying attention to the drain pan to make sure that the water does not overflow the drain pan, okay? You don't want to get water on the floor of a walk-in freezer because it will instantly freeze and then it just turns into a giant ice skating rink. But I like to use hot water because it seems to work the best. So Justin emailed me. Justin is not a service technician, I take from his email, and he sounds like a homeowner, which is great. I have no problem answering these questions. So he wanted to know what my opinion the best air filter for his home air conditioner was. Okay. When it comes to air filters for your home air conditioner, Justin, one thing you need to understand is the more you filter the air, the cleaner the air is going to be. Okay. But on the flip side, the more you filter the air, the more you slow down the airflow going back to your air conditioner, your air handler, your furnace, whatever it is, okay? So the higher the MERV rating on the filter, the more of a restriction there is on that airflow going into there. Your air conditioner will not work properly if it does not have the right amount of airflow going to it. It can cause freeze-up issues. It can cause all kinds of things, okay? Comfort issues and different things like that. So what I would suggest is that you talk to your installing contractor, whoever services your air conditioner, and they need to properly size an air filtration system for your existing air conditioner. Now, if you're going to go the route of buying your own filters, I would not buy anything over a MERV 10 rating, in my opinion. Probably stick closer to MERV 8 rating if you don't know if your system can handle that, okay? The thicker the filter, the better, right? I have 2-inch filters in my house because I don't have a filter box for a 4-inch or a 6-inch, but I have 2-inch filters and I go with a MERV 10. I don't put anything more in there because that filter is a massive air restriction, okay? So the thicker the filter, the more surface area that it is. I prefer that people stay with pleated filters, but I would highly discourage you from buying the hypoallergenic, super air purifying, whatever, insert brand name of filter from the big box stores. Be careful about that stuff. Try to go with 2-inch filters whenever possible if you can fit it into your system. But always want to lean on your contractor to find out what they recommend. You can install super HEPA filters and different things like that, but your system has to be designed appropriately for it to allow the right amount of airflow going to it. So hopefully that answers your question for you. All right, let's get to the live chat questions here. Let me see. Does inverting the recovery cylinder make it go faster? It really depends, Mr. Green, on what you're working on, okay? So oftentimes people have seen, it's not so much about inverting the cylinder, but it's really about avoiding the liquid port of a recovery cylinder, because I don't think I have it back here anymore, but I had a recovery cylinder that I had taken apart. And what you'll find is there's a liquid port and a vapor port. The liquid port has a dip tube that goes all the way down to the bottom of the recovery cylinder. And that dip tube is smaller than a 1/4 inch. So it's smaller than the diameter of your refrigerant hoses. So what I would suggest is hooking up to the vapor port and recovering and pushing gas in through the vapor port, and you'll find that the cylinder will let you fill it up faster because you're not pushing through that restriction. Now, when it comes time to charging, you obviously, if you want to charge really fast and you want to use the vapor port, you're going to need to invert your cylinder to charge appropriately, so that way you can get liquid out of there assuming that you're using a blended refrigerant, which almost everybody is nowadays, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, as far as torching, yeah, that one guy says, torch it, then replace all the wires. So yeah, I will oftentimes see people saying that they love using torches to defrost an evaporator coil. My experience, I'll get like a MAP gas torch, and I've tried defrosting an evaporator coil with a MAP gas torch. And what I find is that the fins start melting, the wires get melted. It's just too much heat, and it's kind of wasted heat. I find in my experience using hot water is much more effective. You get a better coverage area. It just seems to work a lot better than trying to use a torch. You don't really have to worry about a whole lot other than trying to avoid getting water on the floor. When you're using a torch, you don't want to overheat it. You don't want to leave it in the spot. You got to keep it moving the entire time. And I just don't find it to be very effective. And then using a torch, you got to worry about carbon monoxide buildup and different things inside the walk-ins. Because think about it, you're working in a confined space, right? The door closes, it's sealed off, doesn't allow air inside. And then you're sitting there torching an evaporator for an hour and a half. That crap is going into the box and you're just breathing it in. So it can't be good for your lungs. So be very cautious about that. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Use the push-pull method if you have a larger system. Jason Johnson says, yeah, that is a great point. If you do have a larger system, the push-pull method of recovery will definitely speed it up. I have never had the need, because I work on the smaller stuff, to use the push-pull method. But it's not very difficult. Just Google push-pull method. It's rather easy. If you just read it, it makes sense, okay? It's a matter of recovering liquid, then recovering vapor is all that it's doing. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking for questions right now. How many times have I been hit with the lovely phosgene gas that you know and love? I have been hit with it a few times in my career, especially earlier in my career. I cleared out a restaurant one time, the kitchen, because I was pre-1992 venting refrigerant while I was working on an ice machine. I was standing on the ladder again before it was illegal, okay? I was standing on a ladder and I was instructed to vent the refrigerant out, again, being ignorant and dumb, right? And just listening to what people told me. And I was doing so. And as I'm standing up on the ladder, I start to see the cooks coughing in the kitchen. And they're coughing and they're gasping. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, and they're like, something's wrong, something's wrong. And I stepped off the ladder and it hit me. Being up on the ladder, the gas was lower, right? So what had happened was the refrigerant fell down and hit a flame. And then once it hits the flame, that phosgene just the whole building goes into it, right? But because I was higher, I was just standing up on the ladder like la-di-da-di-da, you know? And I stood off, and luckily the building wasn't open yet or anything. The exhaust fans were running. We just opened the doors. Everybody stepped outside for a minute. Nobody called the fire department. This was one of those moments that could have changed my career, right? Someone could have called the fire department. It would have been a disaster, but luckily, everybody calmed down. We just opened the doors, cleared the space out, and I never did that again. So, knowing what I know now, what do I wish I had known when I started out in HVAC? I mean, you know, I kind of talked about it a lot, but I wish that I wouldn't have just trusted what people told me blindly without asking questions. Now, I didn't necessarily want to be rude to anybody and say that you're wrong, but I wish I would have asked more questions, and I wish I would have paid attention more in school early in my career. Obviously, I was a young, dumb teenager and figured my stuff didn't stink, and, you know, I was God's gift to HVAC and all that stuff, and I've quickly been humbled by all that and realized that I didn't know crap, okay? There's another thing, too, what you're going to do, and I remember my dad telling me this, and it hit me, too. It hit me about 5 to 10 years into my career, because all of a sudden, you know, you're working in the HVAC and you start getting comfortable and you start thinking, you know what, I'm doing good. You have a lot of good service calls. The customers like you. You fix everything. All is happy. And then you're going to get smacked in the face really hard and you're going to get set back in your place because you're going to realize that you've just been doing the easy stuff. And welcome to the big time. You're going to start doing the difficult calls and you're going to be humbled, you know? So I was definitely put in my place I'd say somewhere between the 5 and 10 year mark, and I'd say more or less 5 year mark, where, you know, I thought I'm doing great, I know all this stuff, and then you start getting some difficult stuff, or you get something handed to you that's not just cookie cutter, and you really got to think about it. And it's like, whoa, you know. So just don't be too cocky. You know, that's a really important thing in this career. All right. Let me see what else we got going on in here. If you guys got more questions, make sure you put them in caps lock, and I'll try to get to them. Okay. So we have been super slammed at work. Again, I already said in the beginning of the stream, I'm like way behind on service calls and different things like that, but I can only do what I can do. And I got to say that this weekend was crazy. I had super busy. I was working till midnight Friday night, and then I had a 12-hour day on Saturday, and my daughter's birthday was on Sunday. Luckily, I didn't get any service calls on Sunday, so I was able to spend my daughter's birthday with her. But guys, those of you that already have kids older than mine or as old as mine, wow, what a trip, man. My oldest daughter turned 15 this weekend. And my wife and I it's crazy to think that in a year, my daughter's going to be driving a car. Like, smack you in the head kind of a thing, you know? I remember how stupid I was when I was 15, 16 years old. And I just hope that my daughter doesn't do the stupid stuff that I did. I'm doing my best to teach her and give her a good head on her shoulders and, you know, give her good reason and letting her make decisions on her own. But holy moly, man, my daughter turned 15 years old. That's just nuts. It just blows my mind that I have a 15-year-old daughter. Holy moly. And I know some of you guys are already there and you have kids much older than that, but it just, whew, man, sets you in your place for sure. For sure. All right, so let's see. Clubfoot Billy, you said you saw my cool little drain clearing tool. You use a air plunger from Home Depot. Remove the plunger end and add a small section of flexible tubing. Works wonderful on puller pop drains at... Yeah, that's exactly what mine is. I have a flexible 1/4-inch hose that it connects to a hose nozzle, and it has a rubber plug from like an air nozzle or something like that, so it seals up the drain. Works perfect for blowing stuff out. You can get in reach-in coolers because it's about this long. You can reach in there and not have to climb in the whole cooler and blow the drains. I love that little thing. It's awesome. Let's see. Bennett Palmer, your home HVAC system uses natural gas for heating part. Is natural gas heating dangerous? It can be, but I'm going to tell you that majority of the furnace or forced air heating systems across the country are going to be natural gas. So the most important thing you need to understand is if you have a natural gas fired system or if you have any natural gas combustible appliances in your house, a water heater, dryer, range, oven, whatever it may be, you need to have carbon monoxide detectors all over your house. Okay. Very important. A furnace, a natural gas furnace is fine if that's what's efficient and effective in your area. Some places it's cheaper to go to electric and have a heat pump, but if it's installed properly and maintained properly, there's nothing wrong with having a natural gas fired system. Just make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors all over your house. And that's not just with the furnace, that's with an oven, a range, any of that stuff, okay? Anything that has combustion in it, you need to have carbon monoxide detectors. So, all right, hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. Ghostface says that someone says they can pull a recover refrigerant or pull a vacuum by using their mouth in a pinch. No, that's not possible whatsoever by anybody. So let me see what else we got in here. Scott, I haven't seen you in a while. Scott, what up, bud? HVAC rookie. How you doing, man? Long time no talk. You don't call me no more, Scott. What up, dude? Yeah, I mean, you know, you call me all the time, you text me all the time, and then you just move out of the Southern California area and you don't call me no more, man. What up, dude? No. Scott's a cool dude. I met him at the AHR show a couple years back. Really cool guy. And he was local to me until he defected and went to Northern California. You know, trying to get up to that more yuppie area. Whatever. Bet you the weather's a lot nicer up there, huh? What do I think about R290? It's just another flavor of refrigerant. There's a few safety things you need to worry about. I work with it. A lot of my refrigerators have R290. It's nothing to be afraid of. You just got to be careful, follow proper refrigeration practices. That is all. Understand that you don't recover R290. If you do recover it, you have to have specialized equipment. A standard recovery machine is not going to fly. Most of the time, you're legally allowed to vent it into the atmosphere. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. What age did I start my career? When I was a 7-year-old, I started working for my dad, sitting on his bucket holding his flashlight. Now, I officially started working with my dad in 2001, officially when I was 18, I think. Yeah. And then from there, you know, that was all official, but I grew up in the trade working for my dad. All right, let's see what else we got in here. Let's see, your ex. Yeah, so. All right. Am I going to AHR 2022 in Vegas? I want to go. I mean, it all depends on how everything happens. I mean, the plans are that I'm going to be there. Even if I have to go just for the day, because I'm only about 6 hours away from Vegas, so I could drive up there for the day or the afternoon or something if I needed to. So, all right. Is an R290 basically liquid propane gas? Yes, it is, but it is unodorized 98% pure propane. So it doesn't have the odorant added to it to make it smell funny, so you can't smell it at all, because that odorant is a contaminant and can cause contamination issues. So, all right, guys, I am about to wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you guys. It has been awesome. I'm glad I was able to make it to the stream tonight. I know it's been a while. Work has been hectic. If I missed any questions, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I really do appreciate you all. I will say that I am behind on emails just because of how busy I have been, but I will definitely try to get to them. If you guys haven't already, please check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. It's a cool way to support the channel. There's some merchandise available on there: hats, shirts, beanies, sweaters, all that good stuff. We package it and ship it here. My wife, this is her desk that she does it all on. I try to move everything out of there. We got boxes and shirts and stuff everywhere, so she ships it all out. And, you know, it's just a great way to support the channel if you can. I really, really appreciate you. And I'm going to go ahead and cue up the outro music and put up the end screen. And, guys, we will catch you on the next one, okay? Thanks so much. You guys just can't get the hint, can you? You can't. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not. Just go home. Just go to your home. Like, I don't know what else to say. You guys need to move on. You need to go somewhere else. Like, I got nothing else to give you. You know? Just nothing else. That's it. I don't understand why you're still here. You guys, you're just blindly watching me just babble, and I got nothing else for you. It's time to go. All right, I can't do that. I got a fan blowing in my face, and my eyes are too. Like, I was trying to do the whole stare thing, but it's blowing in my eyes, and just,